Welcome to the session today on the emissions, what are we at here? What are we talking about? The reduction of carbon emissions in the built environment. So my name is Tanya Doran, and I will start by introducing myself. I lead the Western Canada carbon team for Stantec Consulting, so we focus largely on the full life cycle of emissions, energy, and emissions reduction. I also have the pleasure of working with a team of holistic sustainability specialists that look at the full life cycle of buildings as it relates to health and well-being, certification tools like BOMA Best, LEED, and others. So I have a distinct privilege to work with the team from Victoria through to Winnipeg, and then nationally with the team across Canada and into the US. So I work right here in our Edmonton office, homegrown, and have that pleasure of doing that every day. So I like to think I save the world, but just in my little piece of it. I have a lot of volunteer opportunities, and I give back to our industry quite readily. So I work with one of our panelists here. I'll let her introduce herself. I sit on the BOMA Edmonton board. I'm also the founding chair of the Smart Sustainable Resilient Infrastructure Association, who has a panel present or a session here after ours later today. So check that one out as well. So we're really proud of the work we do there for GHG reductions and innovation. So with that, I'm going to let some of my other panelists introduce themselves, and I just want to point out it wasn't purposeful, but I think this is the first building industry panel I have ever seen, because usually we go to these events and there is a manel up here of all men. And when I pointed out that this was a full female panel, somebody named it a fanel, and I thought that was kind of awesome because it wasn't with purpose, but it's probably the first one I've seen. So I'm going to hand things over to Lisa to let her introduce herself.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Lisa Baroldi, President and CEO of Building Owners and Managers Association of Edmonton. BOMA is the longest standing commercial real estate association in North America, dating back to the 1900s. So we're a global network focused on everything related to existing buildings and building performance rather than the development side. There's a BOMA in every major North American city, a BOMA Mexico, a BOMA China. So it's really a lot of fun to be a part of that global community and share best practices and exchange with ideas with colleagues. So BOMA Edmonton serves commercial property owners of retail, government, office, industrial, multifamily, medical, any commercial property. We also serve property and asset managers, operators, and all service providers in every sector, from brokerage to cleaning to HVAC and architecture. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the hub that we have, the community that we have at BOMA. And I always say that BOMA is where the boardroom meets the boiler room. So our members are the backbone, sometimes the invisible folks who are making the building operate on a day-to-day and an asset for the long term. So they have a ton of technical expertise, and we're just really delighted to serve them in the Edmonton region and in the north. So we serve Northern Alberta, Northwest Territories, and Yukon. So it's a little bit about BOMA. Thanks for having me.
Check. Yeah, all right. Hi, my name is Brandy Burdeniuk. I am the Director of ESG for North America for Avison Young. I see some very friendly faces here. I'm really happy to be home, and those are words I never thought I'd ever say about Edmonton. I've spent the last 5 years or so out of Toronto, learning all I can to bring that knowledge home. My purview, again, is across North America, so I'm also seeing all sorts of trends that are in alignment with and very similar to where Edmonton finds itself now and where we need to get to. My background is actually an industrial designer by training, and I can see another industrial designer in the room, so I'm not the only one for the first time in a very long time. But to all of the folks on this, I think one of the main things we want after this is to continue the conversation. None of this can happen on our own. Sustainability and decarbonization is no longer a competitive advantage. It's sort of table stakes. And so let's keep these conversations going. Come talk to us. We're all delightful. And now I'll pass it over to Barb.
Thank you. My name is Barbara Daly. I'm with the City of Edmonton, and I'm a Senior Program Manager in the Environment and Climate Resilience section. I think we're a section. And today, my responsibility is to share with you what the city is doing to reduce reduce emissions in the built environment. And I did bring a long list of things, and maybe got an eyebrow from from Tanya through email. So I'm just going to share with you details of the kind of the key ones, and then I can bedazzle you with the whole list outside of this panel.
Barb can bedazzle us. Sometimes we forget the awesome things that are happening in this city, and I'm going to just take a few minutes to remind you of some of the city's goals. So the city clearly has their community energy transition strategy and action plan. Within that, there's pathway 2 that looks at emissions neutral buildings. So they have made a commitment to really support those stringent requirements and the federal and alignment with the federal and the provincial code requirements on that place. And I'm going to start by being a little spicy and also just reminding everybody that codes are for laggards, not leaders. Certainly here in the city of Edmonton, 75% of our building permits prior to the adoption of NACB 2020 in April exceeded step 1 of the National Energy Code for buildings. So we were already doing it. We were pulling up the laggards when we adopted a new version of code. That is what codes are for. They are the floor, not the ceiling. We shouldn't be aspiring at any point to do the absolute minimum we have to do to avoid going to jail. That is the reality of codes. But we are aligning with those codes. We are pushing on that piece, and Edmonton is certainly looking to reduce our overall emissions portfolio. Within that, the city has committed to support the acceleration of emissions neutral buildings. Barb's going to let us know how lots of that is happening and how we can all align. Support residential, commercial, institutional property owners to reduce their overall energy use and utility costs through retrofits and energy improvements. Certainly we're seeing some of that come underway now. And then support low embodied carbon buildings and infrastructure. So for those of you that don't know what embodied carbon is, we're just really starting to have this conversation in this market. Embodied carbon, that's the big hit. When we talk about operational carbon, that is 25% of the emissions of a building. That is the piece that we're using today for heating and cooling our building, putting our lights on. The embodied carbon is what goes into creating the materials, getting those materials to site, constructing that building, at the end of that life cycle, decommissioning that building and sending it to landfill. So we have an opportunity to save emissions with embodied carbon. Certainly in Vancouver, there's policy coming that way as well, but it is within the city of Edmonton's emission neutral commitments as well. So just some key reminders about what's coming. We have a commitment, we heard a little bit about it this morning already, about reducing energy poverty. So it's great that we are talking about some energy efficient buildings because we can build all the houses we want. If we can't afford to heat them, we've done something wrong. Let's just start thinking about what that means. And I heard today, this morning at our panel or our session this morning, that we can have it basically good, cheap, or fast, the 3-leg stool. But cheap and fast is there. But if we stop to build it good, we have people living in homes with $700 heating bills in January and February that they can't afford, and they're still choosing which bills to pay. That is a problem in terms of energy poverty. And then that last one is really catalyzing the local green building and energy efficiency industry. And I think that's why we're all here today, because I think this is what we do every day in our day jobs. So those are really important reminders for all of us that we have some goals that the city has set. And the city is, the last piece I just want to remind us of is the city has demonstrated some leadership as well with their own building portfolio and their policy for sustainable buildings and climate resilient buildings with C627. So that also for their own infrastructure requires an emissions neutral building requirement, aligns with the 1% budget alignment for renewable energy on projects, and a number of other commitments there as well for climate resilient and climate resilient design. So they are walking the talk in terms of how they meet these commitments in their initial emissions neutral pathway. And it's really key. And I think everybody in this room, I like to think we all have skin in this game. So, how we can help achieve those goals as a community and how we can move that needle forward so that we can help the city and we can be, number one, if you will. We heard a lot this morning about Calgary and how they're doing a little bit better. I think we can do better. I like to focus to Edmonton a lot. They're doing a lot of really good things. I like Edmonton's 627 policy. I use it as a reference very often across Canada with municipalities and how they've moved that policy forward, and they've allowed flexibility within their policy with an overarching policy and then administrative guidance underneath that they are more flexible to be able to change and adopt without having to go to council and be responsive. So policies usually get adopted every 5 years. 5 years isn't moving fast enough in terms of how emissions and technology is changing. So we can do that. So the city has some leadership opportunities, and I hope we're going to talk a little bit more about that this morning. So we're going to start a little bit with everyone. We're going to start with Barb because she does indeed have a little laundry list of things to celebrate this morning, and we're going to give her the floor to talk a little bit about what the city is doing and how they're supporting the emissions reductions, some of those key pathways that the city has committed to.
Thank you. Check, check. So just for a little bit of context, Tanya mentioned the energy transition strategy. We have an adaptation and resilience strategy as well. And out of that, there's a long list of action plans and tactics, and that's the driver for my team. And what we choose to pursue, we have the permission to do it. In reaching out to the audiences in the city of Edmonton, we have several audiences. We have low income, we have affluent, we have businesses, and we try to tailor our programs to reach out to them, to understand their objections and their needs, and then look for supporting and advancing the retrofitting and improving of their buildings through help from the city. So every couple of years, the city does a survey, and consistently over the last 8-10 years, the support for the city being involved with and helping building owners, residents do something about climate change is consistently 70% and higher. So we've got our marching orders from the citizens, the voters, and from that, you'll hear us refer to that regularly, different questions and why we thought this was a good use for the city money, or this was a good way to use resources at the city. So the first program I'd like to talk about is in market right now, and it's called the Clean Energy Improvement Program, and it's called PACE everywhere else in the world. It's basically a proven concept, started in the US and led to billions and billions of dollars in retrofit investment in the US. And it's an interesting twist on financing. So the model is that your municipality provides financing for you, a property owner, to retrofit your property, your asset, with renewable energy or energy efficiency retrofits. No money up front, ideally. Our program pays directly to the contractors after you choose your upgrades, and the repayment is done via the property tax bill. It's long-term, up to 20 years repayment, very competitive rates. You get to take advantage of the borrowing rates that the city gets. It's also transferable. So we were trying to address the objections of, I don't have the money up front to pay for these, $50,000 in retrofits. I'm not going to stay in this house, or I'm not going to own this commercial building for more than a couple more years. So the transferability ends there, and I'd like low-cost financing. So we've been able to take care of all of those things. The regulation passed in 2018 and became into law in 2019. There were a few bumps with actually getting it off the ground. We were second. The mighty Rocky Mountain House was first, but we were second and also had the first commercial program in the country. And we really engage a lot with other municipalities to share our learnings. These are the mistakes we've made. These are the other mistakes you can make. So the Clean Energy Improvement Program was in market for 2 years, lots of interest, to the point that even before the final report is in, we haven't even finished all the pilot projects, but council had us come back with a new bylaw, and we launched the permanent program, but multi-year program last Thursday with $20 million. So it's a week in, and $5 million has actually been committed already. And so really there's interest. We're not going to limit it. First come, first serve, and the market can determine how much of that $20 million is used and how quickly. And I've already got a memo written that goes to council at the 80% mark saying, we've reached 16 million in commitment, council. What are your next steps for administration?
I'm going to give you a chance to take a deep breath because that was a lot of information. I think I think one of the things that Barb's really trying to stress is this takes collaboration. This takes time to do it right. And 2030 is 62 months away. Okay? I know it seems like it's far out, but it's not that far. And so the power of policy, you said 2018, 2019, that feels like a few lifetimes ago, doesn't it? That's like pre-COVID, if we use that as like a marker of time. And it was really the collaboration between all of these different municipalities with the Minister of Municipal Affairs at the time, Shay Anderson, and he had to fight, and I mean fight, for this to be able to be put in place. And so make sure you take note of this program and access it, because it takes time to put these things in place, and if people don't utilize them, we're not going to see the traction that we need. And so, what was it called again?
CEIP.
Clean Energy Improvement Program? Mm-hmm. Yeah, all right. PACE everywhere else. Property Assessed Clean Energy, all right? All these acronyms, all this jargon. Before we get too far into this conversation, who's in the room? Can I ask? Yeah.
Has anybody actually tapped into the CEIP program?
One, okay. Who here is from architecture, engineering sort of backgrounds? Two, okay. Who's on the development side? Who's like in real estate, ownership? Handful. Who's in planning? Okay, good to know. Who did I miss? Who's here? What do you do? Okay, so policymaker. Are there any builders in the room? Okay, so now we know. Who's a homeowner? I'm not. Not yet, anyways. Who's renters in this room? Yeah, okay, good to know. So those homeowners that just put up your hands, you can utilize this program to put solar on your house, to do all sorts of improvements. So make sure you take access. I know sometimes municipal websites are a cure for insomnia, but this program will literally help you fund the improvements you want for your house and try and do it before we're in those deep, deep cold days of January and February.
So I was going to use my teacher voice, but I'll use the mic. The other thing I heard Barb just say that I think is really important is that 25% of that funding is already gone. It's first come, first serve. It tells me we have a backlog of need and desire to be energy efficient, to fund and to retrofit our homes, and to use low interest financing or CIP, Alberta PACE, on our retrofit projects. So, that is I think a really important piece that Barb's already got her memo drafted for when we get to that 80% line that we're probably going to cross way before anybody expected it, because we do have a backlog and we have a bit of a gap of programs that are collectively in our market in Alberta in absence of an official energy efficiency agency that provides that. So we kind of piecemeal some things together in some of that, and good on the city of Edmonton for taking that leadership. It is still the city, and I think 8 other communities now have adopted CIP program. More than 20. See, I'm already behind. I haven't been to the website in a while. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in and make a comment if you don't mind. Barb's going to list several other fantastic programs, and we'll all be talking about incentive programs and different things that are out there. And I think the thing that's very clear to me is the gap in communication that we have. And I know often that something great will come out of the city, the MERB solar residential program or whatever it is, and I'll get a phone call. Hey, can you help us promote this? We have to get the money out the door in 2 years or 6 months or whatever it is, and we don't have enough commercial building owners subscribing to it. And so somewhere in the process, I think we need to figure out, do we need to be at the table earlier on? How do we shape the programs with you in a more meaningful way, and have some kind of ownership, and therefore we'll promote them and get them out there? Like, there's something there for me. Also, this is a fast-moving environment, and I think having aggregated sites with all of the tools and resources and programs would be really helpful for homeowners and building owners. So we're hoping as BOMA to work with some of our partners to make that happen, because there's a lot out there. And honestly, we're in it's an incredible incentive environment right now. So take the money and make some stuff happen. Like, that's where we're at. So
we've only made it through one of Barb's many programs, and this is what we've had to say. I just want to acknowledge we have 20 minutes left. And what I also heard Lisa just say is, if only we had a centralized energy efficiency agency in this province for which to support all of us, community, businesses, residential, in providing energy efficiency opportunities. So I say that tongue in cheek if you didn't know we had one and it was dissolved.
I also just want to say there is a federal site that just got launched last week that consolidates all of this for homeowners. And so add me on LinkedIn, and I'm going to post all these programs. I'll collect from all these people and post them after this, because this is something that, it's jargon. It's alphabet soup. It's really hard to keep track of all these programs. But we want to make sure you utilize them.
I promised Barb 10 minutes to tell us some of this, and I knew this was going to be hard to try to moderate the expertise that we have here. So, Barb, you're on.
I'm on number 2 and 3,
Great.
and then I'll be done.
Of 47. Great.
So I'm going to talk about benchmarking, and I'm going to count on Lisa to reinforce how important it is. So benchmarking is a program that cities had. We're going into our 8th year to recruit buildings. It's voluntary. We have more than 1,000 buildings who have offered up their utility information. And the service the city provides is a number of things: speakers and some networking and engagement. We had rebates before, but the most important part is it allows a building to benchmark themselves against against previous years and understand the impact of what their retrofit investments have made. And also it benchmarks them against other like buildings in the city. So we've built up a lovely database. My colleague Marnie runs it. She's very dedicated and she's in her 8th year of recruitment. It's just not super sexy. And so as much as it's been around for a number of years, we continue to go out and knock on doors and explain. It's a free service. And it really does, as a service from my perspective, it's a service to building owners to get them ready for regulation. That's coming in 2 years, 10 years. So really, to some extent, we just have a charm offensive that the city has to offer. You know, limited budget, education and encouragement, but we really are trying to get building owners, residential and commercial, ready for, I guess, climate catastrophes, but also regulation when they'll be forced to do this. So there's just a bit of a continuum that we're on.
So I'm just going to say this in a different way, is that the city now has a voluntary disclosure program with the large energy disclosure program, or building the benchmarking program on that place. That is the carrot. For those of you that just heard the other part of what she said, the stick is coming. Regulation's coming. There's penalty.
Entire province of Ontario, which is also a conservative province, right? These are mandatory disclosures that are coming to our market.
So I have a slide. Brandy and I spoke together yesterday in Calgary, and I have a slide because I love it when I walk through New York, and on every door there is a scorecard for energy efficiency. If you own a building and you're trying to attract tenants in that building, do you want your scorecard at the door to have a D- on it? Every time you're trying to attract a tenant who has ESG goals in their portfolio, and they want a place where their employees can thrive because they have a healthy environment that's energy efficiency, do you want a D- on your door? Do you want an A- on your door? What does that look like? How are you going to rent that space out? How are you future-proofing your portfolio if you're not providing an energy efficient opportunity for those that also have goals in terms of energy reduction? So the city has given every commercial building owner an opportunity to learn, engage, involve themselves in that community, benchmark themselves, understand where their buildings operate, and they've done that education for free, and it's a voluntary basis. So I'm a little biased. I think every building should be participating. They shouldn't have to knock on doors. There's a lot of leaders in that room, and it's really important when those leaders get together, and they're really important, and there's awards being given for those that are celebrating that. And I love it when I see some of the different building types, the condo boards, those who didn't have this conversation even a few years ago, that have done a retrofit and are celebrating that success. So we've made it almost through option 2 of 47.
And I can keep number 3 really short.
Okay. So
another first for Edmonton is the Brownfield Redevelopment Program. And my colleague Liam is here. He runs it, does a great job. And basically the model is for contaminated sites. And it's limited to refueling sites at the moment, but he's going to fix that. And what it does is it gives up to 100% of remediation costs back to that developer who had the intestinal fortitude to deal with a really dirty site, but it forces them to do a really quality building. So they need to do LEED Gold certified or better in order to get up to 100% of the remediation costs. And over time, in the last 10 years, it's generated millions of dollars in new assets being built. It's generated great jobs. It's remediating dirty properties across the city, and it's leading to potentially LEED Gold certified new construction.
I get to work in one of those buildings that use that site, so it's pretty special. 3. All right. We're going to keep it short. Thank you. That's a focus on 3. So just a reminder, that website that Brandy said might cure your insomnia might also excite you a little bit. There's lots of great programs there. Barb has a laundry list of programs and leadership that the city has put into place. So we can't talk about them all today because we would need a full morning probably to go through all of those. But I'm going to give Brandy just a moment to talk a little bit about her world, what the brokers are doing, how they're starting to see this evolve, what those trends are, and a little bit about what Avison Young is doing to step in.
Liam, where are you? Can you put up your hand? Okay, everybody talk to Liam if you have a brownfield site. Okay, couple things. All projects, no matter where they are, I know we have a whole room full of planners, every project starts with a real estate decision. Every single one. And so in my role at Avison Young, I get the opportunity to not just talk with developers, I get to talk with owners, and I also get to talk with a lot of occupiers and tenants. What I can tell you about this benchmarking piece is that people now can make their own purchasing and leasing decisions based on the performance of these buildings now. That wasn't something they could do before. They knew what their price per square foot might be, but they didn't necessarily know what their ongoing utility costs were going to be. And so from a business perspective, the same as buying a home, you kind of want to know not just what your mortgage payment's going to be, but also what your utility bills might look like. And so we also have the ability within this benchmarking to create the literacy and the business case for why doing this is important. And the ability, if you're looking at 3 assets to purchase or occupy, being able to look at the historic performance of that building so you know if it's actually going to require a whole new capital plan because it has never been retrofit, or maybe they have retrofitted and you are actually getting a great deal. They just haven't properly assessed and valued all the investment that's happening. And so there's a lot of things that intersect between sustainability and real estate that we're leveraging a little bit differently at Avison Young, where it's not standalone, separate sustainability team, it's service enhancement. So that if somebody's going and doing a building condition assessment, they're also doing a building carbon assessment. We're seeing people really want to see this because large financial institutions do not want to lend money to projects that are going to be stranded assets. And we are looking at over $17 trillion in global real estate right now that is at risk of being stranded due to the fact that it's been either overvalued or nobody's considered the fact that that asset cannot be decarbonized. And that's not my data, that's McKinsey and Company. So, you know, if you don't trust them, I don't know what to tell you. But I also just want to mention within this conversation, women are driving change in real estate, especially in sustainability. And some of us have been at this for a few decades, including myself. And it's so fun to hear people like Barb talk about all these programs because as citizens, we got to be a part of building them. And now we get to be a part of using them. And so if you haven't participated in these programs, take the money, do great things, and then provide the feedback to improve those programs going forward so that we can retain them and create scalable, repeatable projects to get to the targets we need. Again, 2030, 62 months away, okay? We're all in budget cycles, unless you're students. Enjoy not being in a budget cycle for as long as you can. But we're all in budget cycles, so figure out the business case for sustainability because we're already paying for climate. The cost of climate in Canada, from the Insurance Bureau of Canada, just crested over the highest cost for insurable losses we've ever seen since tracking this data in 1982. Anybody want to guess how many billions of dollars? And this is just after the hailstorm in Calgary, so September. Anybody want to guess? How many billions? Just throw it out. Come on. Somebody feels lucky. 5? Not quite 30, but the U.S. is on their way to $30 billion in insurable losses from climate. Here in Canada, the highest we ever saw before was the Fort McMurray fires. The year of the Fort McMurray fires, there was a bunch of other stuff that went on, but that was about $5 billion in losses. As of September this year, we have crested over $7.8 billion in insurable losses. And so people that own buildings and occupy buildings and have to go get insurance really care about this because that means their insurance goes up too. And we're seeing in the US, entire states where insurance companies are leaving because it's too risky to insure real estate in those states. And we're talking the state of California. And so that's one of the largest economies, one of them, in the world. And so you kind of want to make sure if your business is operating in a province or state that you can still get insurance. And then my last point is, I want to make sure that Lisa talks about the Inspire program because we always hear people continue this thing that like sustainability costs more. I'm sorry, but there is so much capital moving into this space right now. We need to know how to access it at scale. And BOMA just launched a program recently that walks you through, and we all can walk you through the program together.
That is a great segue. So, Lisa, what is BOMA doing to support organizations, industries with emissions reduction? And I think you said it importantly when you introduced yourself. You're the only organization that's solely focused on existing buildings. That is a huge opportunity.
It is, and it's an exciting one. And as I mentioned, our job at BOMA is to prepare building owners and managers for the regulatory environment that's coming. We also shape that regulatory environment through advocacy. Right now, we are in incentive and voluntary. We are in that kind of an environment. So the benchmarking program, we were founders in that emission reduction program. And I'll talk about BOMA Best after I talk about Inspire. But Inspire is actually recently launched. It's one of a dozen Canadian deep retrofit accelerator initiatives called DREs. So everyone goes around and calls them Dr. DREs. They're funded by NRCan. So to date, there's $200 million that have been injected into the DREs. And that money has to be spent between now and 2027. $200 million. And the money is really for building owners to get prepared for a deep energy retrofit. So it's all of the assessments, the audits, the coaching, the figuring out what that business case looks like, and then bringing it back to the team, the decision makers. Now, how do you implement that so that you can actually impact emissions reduction? BOMA has received, so BOMA Canada, the BOMAs across Canada, $24.5 million in DRE funding, and so that's a significant amount. Somebody said to me, it's something like, we have to spend like I don't know, $800,000 a month or something. Like, there's a lot of money that has to go out the door to support building owners and managers, and the focus with the BOMA Canada DRE is on B and C class buildings. So any commercial space that's B and C class across Canada can apply for that program. There's another regional localized program run by Alberta Eco Trust. They received about 14.6 or 8 million. They're finding that they're getting a lot of multi-residential buildings subscribing. So they're seeing uptake in that particular subsector. So yeah, the money is there. It's I will say, however, we still have a lot of advocacy work to do because $200 million is great. It's also a drop in the bucket when you talk about the kind of capital investment required for a deep retrofit on an older building. So that's where we're talking about advocating NRCan and others for greater incentives on the implementation side. Also looking at the Canadian Infrastructure Bank and leveraging money wherever we can so that building owners and managers can invest in their properties. The other thing that is a big challenge with a lot of these programs, including the benchmarking program, is access to utilities data. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. I was at BOMEX in Vancouver last week, and there were about 80 building owners and managers from across Canada in this invite-only consultation with the federal government talking about the DREs. And the very first point that was raised was every province has a challenge around getting whole building utilities data because there's a privacy issue. So if you own a building where there are fewer tenants own the data. You can't just, they're not required to give it to you as a building owner. So really a lot of building owners, if they're involved in the benchmarking program or BOMA Best or these DREs, they're guessing when it comes to the energy consumption. So this is how, so think about it. On the one hand, you have a more stringent regulatory environment coming up. So for instance, in Vancouver, an energy bylaw passed whereby every building that is 100,000 square feet or more must report on its energy usage. Must, it's mandatory. If they do not report, they're penalized. They have to pay, right? But they can't get the data necessarily for all the buildings. So there's this tension, and it's not just in BC, it's in Alberta, it's in Ontario. So we have a lot of work to do, and we work with the city, and we're advocating, talking to utilities, providers and the provinces, and actually the ask at BOMEX was for NRCan to try and advocate at the provincial level, because you've got this again, all these programs and this mass speed on one hand, and yet we're being tied up because we can't get specific data. So there is still a lot of advocacy work to do. I didn't get to talk about BOMA Best. Just a show of hands, have you heard about BOMA Best? Okay, great, I don't have to then. It's wonderful, okay.
All right, so
Can I just, one really, really quick note. So from what you just mentioned, from a building operator, owner, and tenant perspective, all of those folks that are involved in some sort of utility use or procurement or payment, they all have different motivators to participate. And so some of the hardest things about retrofitting a building is that the actual utility savings get passed on to the tenant, not to the building owner. And so you have this split sort of reward and risk piece that I think is a really important part of the complexity of this for folks that are in the planning side of things. You might be surprised to find out that we actually have buildings in Edmonton where multiple buildings have 1 meter.
We have campuses with 1 meter.
Yeah, and so it's really hard to get this information. And folks that have been at this for a while, we also know when a building changes hands, sometimes the new owner doesn't even have the password to get into the utility data information. And so sometimes they'll put a whole new suite of sensors and submeters in because they can't access the equipment that's there. And so please ask lots of questions about how this utility data is tracked if it's put in front of you, but then also use it for good things like benchmarking, like capital planning, like improvements on the building that actually show returns quickly so that you can continue to make the business case.
So I'm going to talk quickly about what the design and construction industry is doing, and I think I get the privilege to work on, and with my team and across my integrated design studio in Edmonton and other facilities, to work on some pretty cool local city building projects that with the city of Edmonton. So we're just finishing up Lewis Farms Rec Center that's under construction. So looking at that piece, that is a huge game changer. It'll be the largest rec center in Western Canada when it's finished. We're working on the Ambleside Integrated Services project as well. So looking at that project, it is also targeting emissions neutral under 627. We just kicked off the Southeast Transit Garage, which is also supporting low carbon transportation. So a really nice story there on that piece. But I think there's some other really good news stories as it comes to existing building that my team gets to work on as well. I was telling Lisa earlier, we were working on a conversion project that didn't have funding for 6 years. So really talking about that housing crisis and affordability. They couldn't figure out the funding. And the piece that was missing for a $40 million investment was a $15,000 audit. So we did the math for them so that we could did the audit. We brought Canada Infrastructure Bank on. We understood the investment that was there. They have access to low interest financing and the products that are in there from Canada Infrastructure Bank, working with the BMO product. And when we first met with that product and with BMO, they said, we wish we could see reports like this. This is the gold star report. It makes this really easy to write the paper to get this funding in place. I have never been prouder. We can do that today. It talks about our housing crisis. It talks about affordability. And it talks about what we can do. And finally, the investment that's necessary to access these funds. I don't want to be remiss. There is funding out there, but you need to pre-position for it. Whether you are a private building owner, whether you are a not-for-profit, whether you are commercial, residential, you need to spend money to get money. And I will use an example of a federal program that recently closed last week, the Green and Inclusive Building Program for municipalities and not-for-profits. There's love the feds, great, there's programs out there. There's up to $25 million available for the applications. 11 weeks in the market is what they gave. There is not a shovel-ready project on the shelf in new construction that started design and got to full concept with a full energy model meeting the zero carbon building standard in 11 weeks. Those have to be pre-positioned for and ready. I told more clients in the last 11 weeks no than I was able to support projects to access that funding. Some of my clients are around 2 and 3 of applications under that program, which means we are updating every year. So pre-position, get ready, do the audits, do not target the minimum. In that particular funding program, they have to show a 25% energy reduction. We know from past projects that you better be targeting net zero if you want to be successful. That is, in that case, that grant is highly competitive. The ones that have been successful in the past are targeting net zero emissions. Can we do that locally? Absolutely. Can you make sure you work with the right consultants and contractors to figure that out? I told a story about a municipality that did over 50 audits on their facilities. They got some really good data. Guess what their auditor didn't do? Their auditor didn't model any of it.
Oh my gosh.
They're not able to submit on any of these grant applications because they didn't do a red screen model. It was a spreadsheet model. So they called me at the last minute to ask if we could do it. I said, I am so sorry. We are supporting 20 other applications right now. My team is flat out. We cannot do this, but I can help you get ready for next year. But you already paid and invested in this. You should have already received this, in my opinion. So my last piece is just a reminder that you need to know what you're getting. This is a complicated discussion. It is complex. You don't always know the right questions to ask. Reach out to anybody You know, that is what we're here for. There are resources and there are tools and there are lots of us that are here because the first challenge I think all of us have is, and every time I get asked this question, what's the number one thing we can do? Education, education, and education. Mm-hmm. We understand how to future-proof our projects, we understand why we're doing it, and we continue to educate ourselves and evolve our design practice from a design and construction perspective. That's where we're going to continue to start to meet our goals. So we are moving the needle on the construction industry and the design industry about as fast as we can keep up in that evolution. It's happening. Existing buildings are coming fast and hard. Trust me, nobody went to school to be an energy modeler. I wish. There's one course at NATE.
Did you see those?
Given them instructors.
Thousands of new students in the building science program at NATE. Yay. They had this huge production. They're like competing internationally. Thousands of students. They're expecting 8,000 people to go through the program in the next calendar year.
We only have 5 minutes left. We've only told you what we're doing. We haven't even got to the good part of this yet. So, you know, we give us some good grace for an extra 5 minutes. We started a little late. But I want to talk about how organizations, maybe like the city and BOMA and other stakeholders, can work together to support it. And Lisa, you already talked a little bit about this, but can we focus on the importance of this partnership? Brandy mentioned it as well. You know, we get to develop this on a daily basis. I have probably spent, you know, most of my career and a lot of my personal life giving to this solution and really talking about this as well. But what is the important consideration we have in terms of collaboration to keep building this city, be important in Edmonton, how we can leverage that, I think, to support other municipalities and other cities? Anyone want to take that first?
Well, I'll add a little angle, if this is on, and that's about equity. And I talked a lot about this Clean Energy Improvement Program and the Brownfield Grant. We talked about that. But there are some people on fixed incomes whose ability to address this climate change, perhaps they're living in energy poverty. They have seniors who have some limited growth in their income. And the city can't forget that they are one of our constituents who need care. So we have programs to support and service them as well as we should. We serve all Edmontonians. And for that, we need collaboration with organizations like Alberta Eco Trust and Cambo and Enerva, and to actually do some hands-on work with these people's residences in order that they can remain in place and be more comfortable and save their assets and that sort of thing. So city cannot do that by ourselves. So we've coordinated kind of a range of appropriately networked organizations in order to deliver some of that retrofit financing up front, so no cost financing.
That is great. I've been thinking a lot about private-public partnerships and how important they are. Like, this is a wicked problem, and there are a lot of other wicked problems. For instance, assessment values of downtown dropping and the assessments being shifted. There's just so many, our fiscal gap at the municipal level related to that. So, like, I could name about 7 different wicked problems, and governments will change, but when it comes to the climate, it's just not going to stop changing, right? And I think we need to have more integrated approaches to how we're working together along the way. Like, we've mentioned a few things, like BOMA's been involved in, half a dozen programs and projects with the city. Oftentimes we're getting, it's coming to us a lot, I think greater collaboration among the teams sometimes within the city would be helpful, and more consistency. One of the things that you probably heard, which was a red flag for me, is lots of money, good programs come out, and the window to apply is crazy, or the criteria, or and so even in our session with NRCan, which was an hour, you had 80 bright people saying, could you have spent a little more time with us before you unrolled this thing? Because now we're identifying a few of the areas where there's lack of clarity, there's confusion in the market, there's all these things. So it's going so fast that I think governments also have to spend a lot more time with us to understand the different levels of education and sophistication among building owners. And how are we tailoring these programs to different types of building owners? The dentist group that owns a couple buildings versus the quadrilles of the world versus there's just so many different types of owners and managers, and I think we need to spend a little more time developing these and getting them out in a clear way into the market, is what I'd say.
I'm just gonna be the downer at the end. I'm a serial optimist. I think it's the only reason why I can do this job. But I have a mic in my hand, and I think I have the responsibility to remind people we can't lose another half of Jasper. We can't see Calgary flood again like it did only 10 years ago. We can't watch from afar as 2 hurricanes land on the shores of the United States of America in less than a month. Like, all of this is wildly disruptive. It's disruptive to our lives. I had over 20 family members displaced in the Fort McMurray fire, and many of them never returned because of the mental health impacts and the fact that they lost everything. And so these are real things that we need to consider. And if you have an idea or you need help, connect with us. Again, we have decades of stuff that we have collected and connected and done to put us in this industry where we are right now. Please do not start another organization. Please do not start another group. We don't need any more acronyms, okay? Please, like, work and volunteer as hard as we have to even be up here. Tanya talked about the personal commitments. We have all taken wild career risks to stand in front of large audiences and say, we need to do better. And yeah, I could have gone and made 6 figures right out of high school in oil and gas, but I chose not to. And so I think we still have a beautiful economy here. Let's not waste the opportunity to continue to be an energy province for the future, not just for the squished dinosaurs of the past. And then also, like, we don't have any other options. We have crossed the 2 degrees threshold that we said we were never going to cross. And this is what it looks like now. So if we continue down this path and we don't think thoughtfully and we don't connect with each other and we don't share the solutions we've already had success with, then we're not going to get this crazy amount of climate to slow down. And if we don't change for climate, I believe this is a tagline from the city of Edmonton, if we don't change for climate, climate change is going to change everything for us. And so please connect. My name is Brandy. My last name is impossible to spell and pronounce. And so please just hit me up on LinkedIn. It's the easiest way to reach out to me. I know a lot of these folks are active as well. I think you have our names. Google's the best tool for you. But connect, please. Like, you're not alone, but also mentally, this is very taxing.
I'm going to bring us up a little bit before we close out, because we're the only thing between you and coffee. What I think I've heard today is there's hope. There's a lot of passion amongst the organizations, the companies that are at this table. You're in the room learning more. Some of you already live and breathe this, but there is some new organizations that are out there despite starting a new organization. The City of Edmonton and the City of Calgary have both recently funded the Emissions Neutral Building Information Exchange, which is a forum to share information and success stories so that we can continue to do this. This is an all hands on deck conversation. It is complex, and we're not going to do it if we don't share lessons learned and successes. I know Saria and Pam's in the room, has partnered with them. We really work hard with them to drive innovation for GHG reduction and bring some of those opportunities also to the table to share the lessons learned out of the projects that we've funded for our first round of funding, and we're looking forward to announcing the successful projects from our second round of funding for innovation in this province. So there is good news out there. We are doing great things, not only in Edmonton, but in the province itself. And the one thing that will challenge all of you to do is tell somebody else about the great things we're doing, because we're very humble in Alberta. We don't do a good job of it. We don't do a good job of telling everybody what we're doing as Edmontonians. And I think sometimes the great sustainability messages that we have get missed, and the undercurrent is not there as strong as it should be, and sometimes that's mistaken for not caring or having it not be important. So start shouting from the rooftops what you're doing, start celebrating that success, work with us to be able to do that, because there's a lot of good successes that you've heard already. You know, make sure that we're doing that collectively. And, you know, there is hope, because if there wasn't hope, we couldn't do this. I think that's why I put my feet on the ground every day. I know that's why some of my colleagues put their feet on the ground every day. We're here for a little while longer. Some of us are sticking around. Barb's got a whole bunch more programs she'd love to tell you about. Connect with us and enjoy your coffee and the rest of your day. Thank you so much.